Thank you for being here in an interesting time in education. We're glad you're here. We do want this to be interactive, so certainly feel free to ask questions in the chat, to provide suggestions of things you've been doing that's working well as well, because we can all certainly learn from each other. So we did drop the link to the presentation in the chat, but you can use this bit.ly as well. Just put that in your address bar.
All right, so this session here is called Support ELs and Special Needs Students from a Distance. So we're gonna go ahead and introduce ourselves before we get started.
All right, so my name is Katherine Boyett, and I am currently an Educational Technology and Integrated Studies consultant at TCOE. I'll be going into my 5th year there, and I work with a lot of districts and educators and administrators in ed tech, but also UDL, SEL, things like that. So excited to be here. We are in Tulare County, which when I was in the classroom and an administrator, there were, my first year there were 90% ELs, and then it was, went to about 60 by the time I left in a different district. I think that's about it. Your turn.
All right. Again, I'm Adam Wattis. I'm a tech integration coach for Cutler-Rossi Joint Unified School District out in Tulare County here in rural Central California. Again, grade 6-12 tech integration coach. I work with teachers throughout, probably over 100 teachers that I support, integrating technology into all of the lessons. Give my contact information here. My personal email account, email address. You can probably best way to get a hold of me is through social media. I usually always respond within 24 hours. Again, it's the end of my 15th year as an educator, and where I work in Cutler-Rossi. Pretty much the demographics I serve is about 95% the children of Mexican migrant farm workers, about 4.5% Filipino, and I can probably count all the white kids I've ever taught on one hand. Very low socioeconomic area, a lot of gang issues. Those are the issues I have to deal with where I work, and just like anybody else, we all have our issues to deal with, and that's what I do. So ELs are a big part of what I do. So again, we're gonna do our best here to share our experiences. Nothing we say here is a magic bullet, but it's things that things that we've tried, that we've seen that have worked, that can work, and for you, it's just about adapting some of these ideas to your situation.
And I would say we also have personal, a heart for special needs students as well. At a personal level, my brother was in RSP growing up, and
youngest daughter is autistic, and it's again, that used to scare me, but seeing the world through the eyes of an autistic child, it's such a beautiful thing. So definitely we're going to do our best to share our experiences with you. So
all right.
Show on the road.
So I wanted to start by talking about this. I mean, as you all probably know, CDE came out with the guidebook for reopening. And so we just kind of wanted to show a little bit of context on what the state's asking for and how this kind of aligns to that as we move back to reopening our schools. All right, so in the instructional programs section under special education, this is really a matter of equity. There are certainly challenges for our special needs students when we are either at a distance or in a hybrid model. And so really, you'll see UDL, Universal Design for Learning, mentioned quite a bit. Every single California framework mentions UDL, but also this is specifically mentioned in the reopening guidelines. So this is definitely something that we want to be sure that we're in alignment with the state here.
Yeah. Again, what we're going to be talking about today, when we talk about universally designed here, universally designed things like UDL. You're like, oh, here we go with another acronym here. This sounds, intimidating, but we're going to show you simple ways, real simple little tweaks that can help you be much more inclusive. We're not looking for anything fancy here.
And the idea of UDL is It is necessary for some, but beneficial for all. And we want to be inclusive, but also rather than having a whole bunch of different lessons, if teachers understand UDL and that we're universally designing one lesson from the beginning that empowers kids, that's going to be actually less work for them in the long run. So certainly, this is again the EL, part of the EL section from the reopening guidelines. And you'll see that we still want these students to have those rigorous grade level academic standards. And so what we're going to be showing is not to dumb down content, not to have many different lessons, but supports that will help them be successful with their peers with that grade level.
And again, just to make it simple here, you know, if you ever taught a significant amount of ELs or you taught ELD, you know, two words that you're going to hear a lot about in that kind of instruction is the concept of listening and speaking. So we're going to be giving you resources and strategies that, if you transition as we transition into the fall with reopening, with most of us in a hybrid model, we have a limited amount of face-to-face time. Some simple ways to get the ELs listening and speaking, because when it comes to language development, listening and speaking is such a huge part of language, acquiring a new language, and simple ways to maximize that limited face-to-face time and to do it in a distance learning environment.
And as leaders, I know this is a conference for leaders, which is such a difficult, challenging time for leaders right now with all of these changes, these necessary changes. But we would urge you to take this as a message about equity and inclusion, and share these tips with your teachers as ways to have an inclusive environment that's not as, we're really going to talk about empowering kids so that it's in essence a little bit less work for the teachers by giving those supports to the kids. So let's go on a bit, Adam, and I'd like to know for all of you, what have you seen are barriers for our special needs and ELs in relation to distance learning? If you drop your thoughts here in the chat, that will help us to, as we move forward, to know kind of what to spend a little more time on and emphasize. So we'll give you a moment or two to go ahead and put your information in the chat here.
One right there, limited exposure to English. That's definitely a, let's see, no differentiation. Yep, of course.
Especially the distance, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, parent communication for structuring a day.
Okay. Tools not doing the
can't access the assignments. Okay.
Connectivity.
That's
that was a huge one where I work. When we were really, I know where I work, we've you know, it's been on our board agenda for the last few weeks, going through the process of our district becoming an ISP.
Yeah. So
that's definitely something that, you know, not everyone's able to do, but it's, you know, we're trying to kind of bridge that gap.
Not doing ELD, absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, it's been, and that's not something we want to do, is just drop it. But unfortunately, that has occurred. You're right.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of access is a common theme, and definitely that's statewide.
And so we'll have to make sure that we talk about things that are phone friendly as we move on. Then, Adam.
Yep, phone friendly is one of my passions of the last few months.
Support staff not working. Parent support, certainly. Yeah. A quiet place to do work. That's a tricky one.
IEP goals. IEP
and reliable data.
Yeah.
Okay. Not enough explanation of the material. Okay. Certainly. Visually overwhelming and text heavy. Okay.
That's
one of the tools we're going to talk about will be helpful for that.
Yep, definitely.
Okay. Difficult time following along with Zoom whole class.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. Ephraim just shared some great resources, some toolkits for newcomers. Definitely, we support anything.
Yeah, I like the comment about difficulty with synchronous instruction. Yeah. I'm not a fan of synchronous instruction. I'm in this case much more. I think it's more equitable for asynchronous, just because, you know, we're doing small groups. If you're gonna do synchronous, it's got to be. I would recommend smaller groups. I mean, multiple times a day. You know, as feasible as you can make it.
Right. And that aligns to what Laura's saying is too much talking by the teacher.
Yep.
Absolutely. Certainly. Unable to sit.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so small chunks, part of that is small chunks and some async. A lot of what we're going to talk about is asynchronous.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking at all these things in the chat here. Again, we are on uncharted territory. There's no old wise man right here that we can consult. We're pretty much building the plane while it's in the air. Again, this is uncharted territory. We're figuring this out as we go. This is again, we don't have any solutions, but we have our limited experience here and the things that we've tried, and we all have. I think everyone here has some good experience that they can share. We can figure this out as we go. So, thank you for dropping your knowledge in the chat. Appreciate you guys interacting with us. We're going to go ahead and move on.
Absolutely, into social emotional skills without physical interactions as well. Absolutely. So I want to just talk a little bit about the universal design for learning. Certainly, like I said, necessary for some, beneficial for all. You're probably all familiar with this, but there was a lot of research done decades ago, specifically for special needs students, but this is beneficial for all. And then they looked at the brain and how the brain works, and came up with 3 different principles of the, and came up with a framework, which is here on the udlguidelines.cas.org, that helps us to reach specific goals for students and really make sure that we are inclusive and we increase accessibility. That's the whole point of this. And the idea as well is that we begin by, this UDL is a proactive rather than a reactive approach. So as much as is possible, we want to create lessons from the very beginning that will increase accessibility and remove barriers rather than having to intervene afterwards. So this is, kind of, go ahead.
So I like the little tagline down there. It's necessary for some, but beneficial to all. I think that's a very good kind of focus to have, a kind of a mantra when you're thinking about UDL. As I look at UDL, I'm looking at this, the why, the what, and the how. All I can think of is Dave Burgess's book, Teach Like a Pirate, because if you look at, years ago when he wrote that book, this is what I see. That why is he talks about the pirate hooks. They hook them in, that's the why.
Relevance for them.
And you go through this process here. So I'm thinking of that book. So if you haven't read Teach Like a Pirate, I definitely recommend go and pick it up on Amazon. It's very affordable and a quick, easy read that gives you a lot of ideas that may spur your thinking that'll definitely be a good step to developing your UDL skills.
I would also, just came out this year, Katie Novak, the UDL queen. She does a lot. She's written a lot of books about UDL, but also she and George Couros wrote a book called Innovate Inside the Box, and there's a lot of great tips on there too. I want to just talk a little bit on the next slide here. I really think that this is a great way. This kind of helps teachers sometimes to understand this. So we're engaging with that why. Those effective networks are also, it's not just the relevance of learning, but that's really about that social emotional piece, that connection. Do I feel like this is important to me? Do I feel like I will be successful? The recognition networks are activated when I am able to comprehend content. So that's like the input. So if the affective networks is like the heart and the motivation, which is so important right now, as we know, then the recognition networks are about that input into the brain. And then the strategic networks are about the output. How can I successfully express my learning?
So when I look at this middle one here, explore, from a classroom teacher's perspective, I'm thinking, all right, so how do I hit this part here? This is where your curation skills come in. How are you curating resources for kids to explore the content and get that input? And that in my experience, when I've taken this kind of mantra of curation, it's actually a very enjoyable way to plan my lessons and giving kids a chance to explore a variety of different resources.
All right, so there are some different translation tools out there. actually, if you have Microsoft, a lot of these things are built in.
Yep.
Adam, before we do, I just want to talk about with the UDL portion here and activating these networks, we want to make sure that kids feel successful. That's what's going to activate the effective networks, and also that they're able to comprehend input. So Adam, do you want to talk briefly about Google Translate?
Yeah, Google Translate, man, years ago wasn't very good. It used to translate word for word. It's gotten a lot better where it actually, it does take into consideration the different nuances and quirks between languages. So it definitely is there's a variety of ways to get to Google Translate. You can use the web-based, the app-based. You can, like as we see here in this GIF, there's a Chrome extension. It's built into like Google Docs as well. So there's a variety of ways to access and use Google Translate, and just, I would say, make it okay for kids to use it. You know, the students I teach, they're all newcomers, and they're Google Translate ninjas. My students, like, I'll give them digital text and they'll break out their phone. They'll use the actual the camera function on Translate to take a picture of that, and it translates it right there in front of them, like using the AR to see that the words are translated right into our language. And it does take them a little bit longer, but they're, you know, once they get really good at it, you know, the access is no longer an issue. They're able to access the content. So as simple of a strategy Google Translate is, again, it takes time for kids to learn it, and give them that time and make it okay. Don't make it like some kind of stigma.
And parents as well. A lot of times parents aren't sure how to help and don't realize that. I remember in elementary school, we'd have parents, we'd be in IEP meetings and with ELs, and the parents wouldn't realize that it's actually very beneficial for them to read stories in Spanish. That's still good for their comprehension. So a lot of parents just don't realize this. So something you may want to put in a back to school night or something like that can be really helpful. So I did want to provide this. I was asked to create this tutorial for students on how to use, if you have Chromebooks, managed Chromebooks, and you want to push the Google Translate extension to your Chromebooks. This shows students, and you could share it with parents, exactly how to use it.
And if you're like, how do I get that Google Translate extension to our managed Chromebooks? If, you know, whoever, I mean, it's if you don't know how to do it, or the person in charge of it doesn't know, there's plenty of people out there. I myself can help you. We have Ephraim, who's on right now. He can definitely show you how to do it. It's not difficult. Definitely, we're here to support you in that.
And with this, those tutorials for parents are really helpful. So, and Adam and I both on our websites have some, they're growing. Adam has more tutorials for parents at the moment than I do, but certainly check that out, because sending those to parents is great. And these are all on YouTube, so they can see it on a phone. Okay, so speaking of YouTube, I know some people said one of the challenges is students don't understand directions, and I've heard that again and again. And so YouTube is so helpful. If teachers use YouTube to create a video explaining the directions, it can be quick. It could be 30 seconds. I've spoken with teachers that have said that's made a huge difference. So I would encourage leaders to ask the teachers to create videos, make that connection and explain things. What teachers don't often realize is in the classroom, they are constantly reteaching, going over directions again. And if we want our kids to feel successful and to have access, we want them to be able to understand what the teacher's saying and what the directions are. And the great thing about them putting this on YouTube is there is so many awesome, yeah, absolutely. Ephraim, EL parents need tutorials in their L1. I myself have not been able to do that because I don't speak Spanish, but that's super helpful. Something that is we do want to talk about is the accessibility features in YouTube, which is why I encourage you to invite teachers to put all of their videos they create, their tutorial videos, their teaching on YouTube. Do you want to talk about those accessibility features, Adam?
As you can see here in the GIF right now, there's two things we're going over in this GIF. Is the playback speed, which definitely is something to be aware of, but probably most importantly is translating the subtitles. So, you know, depending on what kind of level your English learners are, you know, maybe they they need they do better reading in English than listening to it. That's one thing, so that they can have the English translations, or if they really need it to have the Spanish language translations within a few clicks of a button, as you can see on this GIF, the Spanish translations of the subtitles are appearing on the screen in real time. So it's for the students that I've taught who are newcomers, this is huge. When you do put this on YouTube, you want to give it time to process. If you like, all right, I'm going to assign it right in 10 minutes, and I just put it on YouTube, it's not going to show up immediately. It usually takes, about, in my experience, around 24 hours for it to process. In my experience, what I've done, if I've waited till the last second to post it to YouTube before assigning it to a class, and the kids will get there like, hey, mister, I can't put the translations on, and they struggle with that. So that's definitely something to be aware of. You want to get it onto YouTube at least 24 hours before you push it out to students, so that way those translations are there. But again, it's a simple way just to get to make it your lessons a little bit more accessible. And the beauty of it, again, this is not just for ELs, this is for all students. So what it does as a teacher, you're doing what you've done, live, but you're pre-recording it, and it puts by pre-recording it puts a pause button on the teacher. So think of how many students over the years, whether they're SPED, EL, or not, who will tune out the second they don't understand something, and they become a classroom management issue. So all they needed was, and maybe they're too embarrassed to raise their hand and ask a question, but if they have that pause button where they can rewind you, then they can go back and maybe get clarification, and they feel more empowered. So it gives the kids more control over their learning. Again, remember, the kids we serve today, this is what I like to call the Netflix generation, because they're wired differently than you and I. When we wanted entertainment, when we were kids, we had to be in front of the TV at a scheduled time. If you take a bathroom break, you better not take longer than the commercials. These kids now, everything's on demand. They have control over their entertainment. And I think that same kind of mantra should be shifted to their learning as much as we can, where they feel like they're in control of it. And by doing it pre-recorded on YouTube, you have the accessibility, and they have that pause button and rewind button, so they feel like they're in control of their learning.
This is also helpful for your those students with audio processing disorders. The fact that they can slow the playback speed down and read the text can be helpful for them as well. There was a question about what languages YouTube offers translations. Vietnamese, yes, over 100. I couldn't see on this for sure if Mandarin is on there, but definitely Vietnamese. Over 100, Efrain says, excellent. Yep. So I would also say, if you have teachers that are feeling, really overwhelmed right now with all of this work and such, I know some leaders that said, as a team, whether it's a content area team or it's a grade level team, each of you make a video a week or 2 videos a week or whatever as we're getting started, so that this way they feel that they can be successful as well. And then the more they learn and see how successful this is with their students, the better able they are to do this. On the next slide, what you'll see is a tutorial for students and parents. So if you'd like to use this is a how-to showing the students and parents exactly how to both turn on the closed captioning, translate, and switch the playback speed up.
All you gotta do, if you have these slides right now, you just click the little share button right here and copy that link, and then you send it out to whoever needs it, students, parents, all the above, and definitely a resource you can take with you.
All right, this is one of my absolute favorites. So this is called the immersive, no problem, we're gonna have to get some Spanish translation ones though for our tutorials. But the Immersive Reader extension is one of our favorites. This is made by Microsoft, and so it's embedded in a lot of the Microsoft products. But the really cool thing is that now a lot of our districts have Chromebooks, and so for Chromebooks, there's now an extension. There are so many great accessibility features, and again, this is going to activate the affective networks of the brain, because kids feel like they are able to succeed, so they're more motivated if they actually know they can do something. The recognition networks are activated because there is the comprehension is increased for the access. So accessibility features on this are text-to-speech, translation, syllabication. There's a picture dictionary. Someone had talked about the fact that things are text heavy and maybe image heavy. If you use the Immersive Reader extension, you can adjust the text size. You can change the contrast for those that have visual impairments. And color coding parts of speech can be helpful for ELD as well, depending on the level. So go ahead and, this kind of shows you a little bit how this would work. Once you have that extension, which again could be pushed to all of your students, you're going to click Help Me Read This. It looks like this, and it will do the text to speech. It will read them to them. And it's actually pretty good. Like, it doesn't sound very robotic at all. So that's one of the things, text to speech. You'll see syllabication, parts of speech, which can again be super helpful as students in ELD are learning how language works. So if you want to go to the next slide, Adam, this shows the picture dictionary as well. So as I click Help Me Read This.
Again, you have to right click on it to access the Help Me Read This.
So once picture dictionary over there is turned on, there it is. Now there was an extension called by Read and Write for Chrome by TextHelp that's similar to this. Actually, I think this is better in some ways, but it cost a lot of money. And so we considered getting it for, back before I was at TCOE when I was administrator, we considered getting it for some of our students, but it was so pricey. So this is great that it's 100% free. This does translation as well.
So here we have just a couple other tutorials, Immersive Reader, that you can take with you. The one that Katherine has over here on the left is similar to the GIFs that you just saw, kind of more for elementary. And then the one I have on the right, my short demo, it's only about 1.5 minutes. It shows it's more geared for secondary students, but for the most part, it's just showing you how to access it, where to go to get started, and how to have it be read, how to have it read to them in their native language.
Great question. So it is the unofficial one. If you're looking for the Immersive Reader extension, it is unofficial because it wasn't actually, I don't know why it's unofficial, but yeah, that's the one to use. And I've never had any problems with glitches or anything like that. So that's fine. Yeah.
And again, tell who's ever in charge of your Google domain to push that out to them. If they need any questions, definitely they can reach out to us. We can walk them through that process. It's definitely worthwhile.
I've worked with a couple of districts in our county who decided to push this extension to everyone in the whole district. In the midst of distance learning, they said, you know, kids are not motivated if they feel they're not successful. Kids are having trouble in a distance learning environment, not having someone one-on-one to explain things to them. And so certainly they said, really, this is, again, UDL says it's necessary for some, but they believed it was beneficial for all. And so they pushed this to every single Chromebook in there for all students.
I remember when I first pushed this out to our entire domain, and I worked with some of my kids and I showed them how to use it. There was a handful of kids that had this smile on their face, like, oh my God, where has this been? This is so great. So it's definitely worth it to kind of be that squeaky wheel to get this pushed out.
I was in a county SPED class, and so I was showing the teacher this extension, and it was so cute because this is a middle school, one of the kids came over, and similar to what you said, so excited. He said, I want that right now. Because again, it makes them feel like they can be successful. All right, so this is something I showed back to school. So you'll see that I have, taking a picture in Google Docs. But what I also wanted to show you here is that there's speech to text in Google Docs. And so what's nice about that with that voice typing, I did this in a first grade classroom. And what was neat about it was the students, especially the English learners, with their pronunciation, Google wouldn't understand them sometimes. And so they felt like, hey, I'm correcting Google. I'm smarter than Google. It didn't understand what I said. And so that speech to text can be really helpful for them. Also, I spoke with a middle school SPED teacher who has her kids mainstreamed in some classes. And she said they are unable to do the assignment by typing or writing. And yet with the voice typing, they feel like they can do this. And so they felt like they could be a part of the class.
When going back to the EL part, it's if you're doing the voice typing, it really forces them to really focus on enunciating and pronouncing the words so Google can understand it. I'll tell a story about my own autistic daughter and our Google Home our Google Home display. That is her favorite thing in the house, is to be able to tell Google to play a certain video or play a certain song through her voice. She saw her older sister, she saw us doing it and telling Google to play certain things on different crafts around the house, and she wanted to do it, but she couldn't because she early on when her speech wasn't developed enough, and it would give her the immediate feedback as she would learn that. Would say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. But she kept on trying, and all of a sudden one day we saw her sitting there watching the video, and I know that none of us helped her do it, but that signaled she was able to enunciate and pronounce words properly so Google could understand, and using it through again, using the voice typing through Google Docs, that's a different ballgame. But if Google doesn't understand you, you're not going to get the right results. So it's good for getting the different iterations in and giving kids that resilience, that the importance of listening and speaking. So they hear themselves saying it. Well, maybe I need to augment it. So that's just a simple way just to give ELs that chance to listen and speak in a distance environment.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of listening and speaking.
Yes.
Speaking of, we talked about Immersive Reader, and what I love is Flipgrid. Flipgrid's 100% free. Flipgrid.com. It's super safe. I know that with, of course, because it's so important that we have student privacy and such. And Flipgrid, you can really lock it down quite a bit. Make it so that you as the teacher, the teacher has to approve all videos, things like that. So Flipgrid's super safe as far as student privacy, a lot of settings you can do. But the really great part about it is Immersive Reader, that accessibility feature that we just talked about, it's built in. I had a student, I was in a class, observing a class, and the student was a newcomer, didn't speak any English. And so we started with Flipgrid, and so she made a video in her native language, which please allow students to do that in their native language. So she spoke in her native language, and then she showed one of the students, one of her peers, how to turn on closed captioning with Immersive Reader and translate it so that the student that speaks English is able to understand what this newcomer said, and then this newcomer, she was able to translate and see what her peers said as well. So they were able to have this conversation. It was awesome. Adam, do you want to just briefly, for those that aren't aware, just give a brief overview of what Flipgrid is? So
Flipgrid's honestly is think of a message board where the teacher puts out a prompt, and traditionally on a message board students will respond via text. Instead of via text, the students are responding with video. As you can see in the screenshot here, you can see their faces, and they respond verbally. This is huge for ELs, again, with the listening and speaking, because let's say that I'm teaching a lesson on World War II, and we're talking about the Pacific Theater and the strategy of island hopping. That's one of the standards for 11th grade U.S. history. And I have these newcomers who I always use Flipgrid before they write. In my experience, when they speak about it on Flipgrid, they're able to write about it later much better. So I have them explain it, verbally much better, whether it's in their own their first language or if it's in English. And when they do it in English, when they respond verbally to my prompt, then before they can submit it, they have to review it. They have to hear themselves first. So they're going to get that listening and speaking built right in. And if maybe I missed some content, or I didn't say that correctly, I didn't pronounce that word correctly, they can trash can it and do it again. And no one's going to know how many takes it took for them to get it right, but they're only going to turn in the best version of themselves. So it's really simple way to get them listening and speaking in in a distance environment. Like you can't do it face to face. This is the next best thing. As a teacher, you can give them feedback.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that they record their videos, you can record yourself responding to them. So then you may give them that feedback and have them redo it. You can have it where, as you can see in the screenshot, this is the unmoderated version of Flipgrid, of a Flipgrid topic. So if it's unmoderated, whoever's already posted, people who post their responses can see it. If it's moderated, then only the teacher can see it. But maybe they, if I'm a newcomer, maybe I might click on an English only student and hear what they said, and kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and I get to listen from a native speaker, and that may help me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I give my verbal summary, then I'll maybe there's a few words there that I can pronounce better, and that gives them that confidence that they can communicate in English much better.
You're also going to be triggering that affective network of the brain, because the motivation goes up with this because it feels like social media. They get to put on a filter and
take a selfie.
And stuff. So there's that, as well as that accessibility piece. So Adam, you talked a little bit about when we talked about the recognition networks being triggered in the brain, the what of learning, having multiple means of representation of content. These are some examples from our county office departments, just to give you some examples. But essentially, if you look at the one on the left there, if I'm learning about ecosystems and I am provided with options of how to access this, not only am I going to feel like I can be more successful, but I'm going to, that's going to increase that comprehension. So maybe I can listen to a book, maybe I can read a book. Maybe I can watch a video. Maybe I can do some virtual reality. So these learning menus are very, very helpful as we are both trying to motivate kids and also help them to have that accessibility and what works best for them. All right, so speaking about the strategic networks of the brain and how do we express our learning. So images are super powerful, especially for not only our English learners, but for our students that are struggling with reading and writing. If I struggle with writing, but I'm able to draw a picture of what I'd like to express, that's great. So, my stepdaughter, Adam's daughter, who's autistic, she's not going to write a sentence expressing something she learned, but she will draw a picture. If you ask her, draw a picture of what you saw on the video or what you heard in the story, she can draw a picture. That way, teacher, okay, they actually got the gist, or they didn't, and I need to go over this with them again.
Yeah, she's very good about watching without even being prompted. She will draw what she watches. Right now, she's in this phase where she's obsessed with PBS Kids. She wants to watch all these PBS Kids videos, and then she comes up to us and she just says, "I want paper." So we'll give her paper, and she takes her colors, and she's drawing pictures of some things she saw in the videos on PBS Kids. A few months ago, her obsession was with Bumble Nums from I forget, it's a YouTube character that she follows. I think it's super simple, as long as I forget which channel it comes from. But she was all about the Bumble Nums, and all of a sudden, all her drawings were of scenes from the Bumble Nums videos. I think after during spring break, we spent some time playing outside with her sisters, and then she drew a lot of pictures of her playing with her sisters. So it's for SPED students, especially with autistic kids, it's a great way for them to express themselves.
And what you can do after they do that, you've got to find a way that they can express their learning, whatever it may be. Maybe it's doing a role play, maybe it's making a video. Once they do that, like once Andrina draws the picture, then we can go ahead and write the word underneath so that you can start to learn to read it that way. So, but you start with what they're good at. When you start with what they're good at and what they're able to do, if it's kids speaking in their native language, instead of drawing a picture, then you can build on that.
So what I've done with Andrina's drawings, I actually scan them, and I actually made a Facebook page for her. So if you want to find it just go to Facebook and look up Andrina's art. There's actually someone else with the same name, but you'll know it's her. You'll see a picture of her wearing sunglasses. That's how you know it's her page. But what really struck me is when I first created this page, I brought the computer to her. I go, look, Andrina, you have, your art has a Facebook page. And she started seeing the art, and I tried to my best of my ability to label each drawing what I thought that she was drawing. And I go, and she looked at it, and she saw the picture, and then she explained it to me of what it was. And my caption, my title for it was totally off. So she knew exactly what she was drawing, and I was able to give me the feedback that, hey, I labeled it wrong. So it really speaks to the simplicity of images and how powerful they can be.
Mm-hmm. Adam, I'm going to have you speak about sketch notes. I'm answering questions in the chat.
Anyone who knows me knows that sketch notes are my jam. I think it's just a great way for kids to express their learning. I mean, it's one thing for kids to just copy a bunch of factoids into their notebook, and hopefully they can memorize it long enough to choose A, B, C, or D on a test. But sketch notes for me are just so powerful. Where I work, we're an avid national demonstration school. We've been that for years, and they're big on Cornell notes. And I thought, as I've learned avid strategies, one thing that pops up to me a lot is the idea of revising your notes. Go and look at your notes and revise them. So what's a better way to reflect on your learning and revise your notes than a sketch note? Take the notes that you wrote as text and transform them into almost like a graphic novel. So I teach sketch notes a lot of places. I've been inspired by the queen of sketch notes herself, Sylvia Duckworth, and very honored that when Sylvia does her sessions, she will then feature my students' sketch notes. So that's a huge honor. But what you see there in the screenshot is my absolute favorite sketch note ever. This is from an English learner. This was their first sketch note they'd ever done. This was from a 6th grade Rome history class talking about the Punic Wars during the Roman Empire. So long story short, in a nutshell, the teacher, who was pretty much on his way out to retirement, he brought me in to teach sketch notes because he wanted an easy day. but he was like, man, after that, he's like, man, I really wish I would have been doing this for years now. Yeah, it's kind of, I'm going out with a bang. And what happened here is he pretty much taught this lesson about the Punic Wars through the text that he explained it as this. The Punic Wars was like a 3-round boxing match, and that in round 1, the Romans won. Round 2, Carthage, the Romans' Mediterranean rival, won round 2, and then round 3, which was the 3rd war, Rome knocked out Carthage for good and won the boxing match. So if you look at the students, they organically created their own graphic organizer. They learned, okay, the Punic Wars, there's 3 components. So if you look there, they divided their paper into 3 different sections. And each one is almost like a graphic novel. Each of those sections tells a story of each of the 3 Punic Wars. And what really, I don't think I need to say it, but there is a graphic right there that kind of jumps off the page at you. You can see where it says, it's a mathematical expression of the tank equal the elephant. So in the Second Punic War, during that part of the lesson, the teacher explained how in that war, the Carthaginian general Hannibal had the advantage of using battle elephants, where soldiers from Carthage would charge into battle with elephants against the Romans, the same way we use tanks today. But that was a great metaphor that he used in teaching the advantage that Carthage had in winning the Second Punic War. So they could have written down, in text in their notebook, they could have copied it down. It says, oh yeah, they used elephants like tanks. But if you look at that sketch right there, the kid's not a great artist. You don't have to be, but they're visually representing these ideas, and it's so much more powerful. It's easier to, for me, it's so much easier to review. If I'm a review for a test, this is much easier than trying to memorize a bunch of words that I copied down in a book. Another one I want to kind of bring your attention to is in the Third Punic War. Part of that lesson, they talked about how Rome, they sailed to Carthage, they burned the city to the ground, they sold the citizens to slavery, and they salted the fields so nothing would ever grow again in Carthage, and Carthage could never rise to threaten Rome again. But if you look very carefully, you see Roman soldiers here with salt shakers in the fields. A simple stick figure representation of a very important concept to this to this topic here. Again, much more powerful than simply writing text. And again, this is an English learner doing this for the very first time. So if you're like, I don't know if my kids can do this, anybody can do this.
I would say too, there was a question or one of the barriers that came up at the beginning of the session in the chat was kids being engaged with Zoom calls, for example. Okay, so if you ask them to, one thing, let teachers know, you didn't give them some time to stop. Yeah. Right? Stop and allow them to take notes, whether it's drawing a picture for those students that are struggling with writing or struggling with the vocabulary and language, or it's written out notes. They are going to be more engaged if they chunk that learning. A good rule of thumb I have heard a few times is 1 minute per grade level, and then stop and have them do something. This will work whether it's like a Zoom or Google Meet call, or if teachers are making YouTube videos and then they're able to stop it, ask them to pause and make that picture there.
Yeah, so before we move on real quick here, as you can see, that sketch note was paper and pencil. And if we're in distance learning, we're going to leave you some resources of how to use Google Classroom to submit an image of work.
I think that's the next slide. Perfect. So these are some videos that show the kids, you can send this, have the teacher send this to them, of exactly how to turn in pictures of that written work to Google Classroom.
So we'll kind of leave you with one last little way to use images with students here. And this one, again, one of my jams here is book snaps. So book snaps are invented by a good friend of ours, Tara Martin, a great educator out in Kansas. And book snaps are a great way for kids to do notice and wonder, to identify textual evidence, things like that, and really mark the text in a way that's much more engaging than simply just scribbling all over a packet that someone printed out. And again, book snaps was developed by Tara using Snapchat, but again, you can do it with Google Slides, you can do it with PowerPoint, you can do it with Seesaw.
I just wanted to talk real quick about, this was a student that was working on inference. And so putting in an image, if they don't have the vocabulary, whether they have special needs or they have language, they're learning English as a new language, this is really helpful for you to know if they actually got that inference rather than them writing a paragraph or something. We talked a little bit about learning menus, same thing with expressing the learning, activating the strategic networks of the brain, giving multiple modes of action and expression. And this is an example from our science department at our county office. So we definitely want to thank you for being with us. We will stay on a few minutes if you have any questions about
Classroom, you have the capability, you have a live person providing private one-on-one words. Google Meet is built into Google Classroom. One way you can kind of do that is if you schedule some kind of like office hours.
Yeah.
So if you turn on Google Meet for Classroom for a certain time, if you put in the an announcement that say from 10 to 11 a.m. on this date that I'm going to be available for you, that's one way to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I think the question was during class, so live person providing during class. So, you could have someone, I suppose, they'd have to have 2 devices. I think if the kid had 2 devices, then they could have, that's tricky though because of the sound.
Yeah, it's
it's a little tricky.
That's a good question though.
Yeah, we'll have to tell Google we want that.
Yep.
So here are our websites, more information. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions and would like some support. If you have a session with us, you'll have free support for life. So have a great day, and we'll see you next time.